Welcome to Corwin's Teacher to Teacher podcast with host Carol Pelletier Radford. Carol is an experienced classroom teacher, university educator, founder of mentoringinAction.com, and author of 4 best-selling professional books for teachers. She believes the best form of professional learning happens when teachers engage in authentic conversations and share their wisdom. In every episode, Carol and her guests share stories about pivotal moments in their careers, successful classroom strategies, and personal actions they take to minimize stress and stay healthy. The Teacher to Teacher podcast is a place to engage in authentic conversation and reflection with experienced educators. We hope these conversations will energize you, keep you inspired, and remind you why you chose to become a teacher.
Hello, and welcome to the Teacher to Teacher podcast. I'm Liz Gilday, Senior Acquisitions Editor here at Corwin. This season of the podcast focuses on mentoring in action, and today's episode is about the role of teacher education in mentorship. Our guests for this episode are Sara Hoeve and Susan Brondyk. Sara and Susan are colleagues at Hope College, where Susan is the chair of the education department, and Sara is the director of student teaching and teacher certification. Susan and Sara give us a behind-the-scenes look at how they set up their mentorship programs to best support both the student teachers and the teacher mentors in schools. In conversation with Carol, they share how they get mentors and mentees on the same page, why establishing a common language is essential, and how they continue to support new teachers even after they graduate from student teaching. They wrap up with tips for busy mentors to help make your mentorship program more sustainable. This conversation was packed with insights for those who organize mentor programs and for mentors themselves. I hope it helps you identify new ideas for your program or practice.
Hello, everyone. I am Carol Pelletier Radford, and I am the host of the Teacher to Teacher podcast, and we are in season 4. I'm so excited. This is episode 6, and the topic for this episode is the role of teacher education in mentoring teachers. So usually in our Teacher to Teacher podcast, we focus on K-12, and that's who our audience is, groups of teachers who are listening and using this podcast to help them further develop. And I'm just going to do a shout out for in the notes, you will see a blog that I wrote called Podcast PD. And in Podcast PD, you can invite your school districts to give you earned credit for professional learning hours for listening to the Teacher to Teacher podcast. So I hope that you will do that. I am excited to have 2 guests today from Hope College, and I know of their work because we both submitted chapters to a book called Mentoring for Wellbeing that was edited by Ben Kurtzayuba. And this book had a whole focus on mentoring teachers around taking care of themselves and staying balanced, because we know teaching is a really tough job. So Sara and Susan are my guests. I loved reaching out and having you say yes. So could you each introduce yourselves and just give me a little bit about your teacher background and where you are now at the university helping teachers? Susan.
Sure. Thank you for having us, Carol. This is great to have this conversation. My name is Susan Brondyk. I started my career as an elementary teacher for 14 years. I'm a Montessori trained certified teacher. And I actually, in that time, started a school, Montessori school. And so I taught early childhood and 1st through 4th grade and loved being with the little ones and helping them grow and develop. That's really my passion. And so after I had 3 children of my own, I switched gears a little bit, and I went back as I was getting my master's. I started supervising student teachers at a few institutions and doing some adjunct teaching. And so I found a passion for working with adult learners. And so that really took me into my graduate work, where I learned about mentoring, and I learned the practice of mentoring and the concepts and the skills that it takes. And so I loved that time, and I was a supervisor at Michigan State for 7 years. And my dissertation was actually about the preparation of mentors. And so that work took me, while I was there, I became affiliated with a group called Launch into Teaching. And we were going around the country working with large urban districts who had high turnover. And we would go in and work with their beginning teachers, their mentors, instructional coaches, and the administrators. And it was a really powerful experience to see how the context changed and put in place these supports for new teachers. And so I did that until I came to Hope College about 12 years ago. And there I teach in the elementary program. So I'm working with pre-service teachers who are going to be elementary teachers. I'm currently chair of the department. And then when I arrived at Hope, they had a really robust student teaching program, but very little in terms of mentor preparation. And so that was one of the first things on the agenda for me. And I worked closely with the director of student teaching at the time and created a program. And Sara has been in the role for what, 7 years, something like that. And she brought just a really fresh take on that. And I'll let her talk about how we're bringing all of our folks together so they can hear the same messaging and really start their work together as they co-teach and co-plan. So it's been a wonderful opportunity to really integrate some of the ideas that I'm passionate about into a place I love.
I can hear that in your voice, and I'm right there with you. I feel like I met a kindred spirit, and what shows up for me in your introduction is the word preparation. Because when I started doing this work decades ago, mentors were not really prepared. It was just like match them up, follow that teacher around, just do whatever she's doing. And that was the advice from higher education. When I took a student teacher, it was like, you're a great teacher. Just, and I remember being so frustrated. And that's actually how I launched my career. I'll share my story in a minute. Because I felt there wasn't a common language of what we were doing in the practice to what teacher preparation in higher education was teaching in the classes. So Susan is the director of student teaching, and that was the role I played. Not Susan, Sara. So Susan is the department chair. Sara's the student teaching director, is the role uh, that I morphed into from the classroom. So I'll share that story. Please introduce yourself to our listeners.
Thanks for having me as well, Carol. I appreciate this time to have this discussion about mentoring. So while Sue started with the little ones, I was on the opposite end of the spectrum, and I taught high school social studies and English, mostly 12th grade English, for a little over a decade in West Michigan. And then I moved into a position as an instructional coach. So I began working with the teachers in the district to develop their goals and collect data and observe them. While I was also doing my master's and then my PhD in English education. So at that time, my goal became to really work with preparing new English teachers to get into their own secondary classrooms. Once I completed my graduate work, I started transitioning into post-secondary education and taught education and English classes at Calvin University and at Purdue University. And then the director of student teaching position opened up here at Hope College, which was a much shorter drive for me. So I joined the team here. And during my time here, Sue and I have worked closely together on a few different mentoring projects, one of them being what we call the student teacher workshop, which she mentioned in her introduction. And that is where we have started bringing together all of our cooperating teachers, our student teachers, our college supervisors for a big night in the beginning of each semester, where Sue and I and a few other of our veteran cooperating teachers and college supervisors do a series of activities and instructional sessions that are on co-teaching and co-mentoring and co-assessing and really how to use a developmental mentoring framework and language and giving the feedback. And that has just been a joy. We've done that now for, I think, about 4 or 5 years, and it's just been a huge success. And I think our mentors have grown a lot in their skills and working with, and feel more prepared to work with those student teachers. The second project that Sue and I have worked on is developing a post grad mentoring program for our graduates during their induction period.
And we're going to dive into that when we get into our topic. So hold that one, because that actually is what I really want to dive into, about how teacher education programs can support the teachers who are teaching now. Because I think we've been doing a decent job with the student teaching. I think what happens is the wake-up call when the student teacher is the teacher. and then the preparation of the mentor, it changes, and so forth. So that's our conversation today. So perfect segue. Thank you. Before we dive into that topic, because I want to introduce it more formally, I want our listeners to kind of get a sense of how important mentoring is, well, to the three of us for sure, in kind of an aha moment or an experience that you have observed or felt yourself through these mentoring conversations, because mentoring is mostly through conversations with people, and they have lots of feelings that evolve through a mentoring conversation, that we know we've been part of. And I can kind of hear our listeners nodding, because most of us have been mentors, informally, maybe not formal, and many of us, all of us have been mentees in one way or another. And let's just take a pause to snapshot what it really feels like before we talk about ways to do it. Um, so Susan, what's a moment in time, just like a snapshot, when you either observed or felt something that you saw mentoring making a difference?
Yep. I think back to a time in my class, there's a fairly large clinical experience, and I had a student in a classroom, and I was actually working very closely with this teacher. She was one of my K-12 partners, and she knew the program well. She knew what we were doing in class. And this young woman who was the mentee was really struggling. You could just feel the vulnerability and the angst that she was going through. And so we worked collaboratively, the teacher and I did, to help her identify some of her strengths, because this was someone who didn't feel like anything was going well. And so I think one of the first things we did was to use our assessment tool to say, look at all these things you're doing well. Which helped her to, you could always see her pause and say, okay, it's not all bad. And then to really use the tool to identify some goals and to drill down. And as mentors, both I was in the classroom and the other mentor was in the K-12 classroom, the third grade classroom. We worked collaboratively to help this teacher work on the goals. And some of it was emotional support, but a lot of it was content. So planning questions, I would help co-plan with her. The teacher was observing, giving feedback. But I think the collaborative nature of that was really a powerful experience for me.
I
And
love
I've
that.
watched
I
that
love
grow.
that. So I love the collaborative nature, because sometimes we just think the mentoring's a dyad. It's just the mentor can talk to the novice and that's it. And we certainly want that, because that's the collaborative. But I feel like this is the supervision triad, right? The university, the school person, the mentee. And sometimes the novices feel ganged up on because it's two people trying to help them. And sometimes it works, which it did work for you. And Sara, what's your reaction to that story? Have you heard that story before?
I haven't heard that particular story, but we have in our program, a big piece of it is that co-mentoring, we call it, right? Because
Nice, nice.
our student teachers have a foot in each world. They're in our classes where they're learning a lot of the theoretical, and then they have a foot in the K-12 classroom and a mentor over there. So I think
Right.
working together, communicating together as mentors only makes the mentoring we're giving stronger, because we're on the same page. We're each able to
Yes.
kind of step in
Yes.
different ways.
And I think that what I heard you say, Susan, is the emotional piece when someone just, they're beginners. It's like me learning how to play golf. I mean, I can't hit that ball. The ball is right there. You would think that I could hit it
Mm.
off the tee. And yet that is humbling and humiliating at the same time. And these beginning teachers are so brave. So the work of a mentor and one or two or however the collaborate has to be very tight so that it fills that emotional um, gap, if you will, that the novice is feeling. So these aha moments, I like to pause before we get into the real discussion, because this is the mentoring. That's where the novice can actually hear and change their practice to help students learn, because that's the whole goal of mentoring, is have students be successful in the classroom. So, Sara, do you have a observation or from where you sit uh, that
Yeah,
shows
I
us
have
how
one
important? Yes.
yeah, I have one I'd love to share. So for research we were doing, I reviewed hundreds probably of mentoring sessions um, between graduates of our program and a university-based mentor. And one of them in particular, I just recall so vividly because I think it really showed me the power of mentoring and the difference that it can make. And we had a student who graduated from our program that was a very strong student, very successful student teacher. And she was hired by an area school district into a Title I school, which she was very excited about. And she had a mentoring session scheduled with one of our university mentors for the very first week she was teaching. And in the mentoring session, her body language, her emotions, she is just overwhelmed. And she goes on to talk to her mentor about what it's been like in the classroom. She has students with just a wide variety of needs. She has emerging bilingual learners. She has students with autism. She has students who are reading, 4 levels below the grade level. Just overwhelming, and no documentation from previous supports they had received, little resources. And she just said to her mentor, I can't do anything more than what I'm doing, and I'm just stuck. I can't do this. And I think a lot of induction teachers feel that way. They just feel stuck and overwhelmed, and they don't know how to move forward. And the mentor then jumped in and just did a masterful job in asking questions to really help that new teacher reflect on the different challenges she was facing. She helped her brainstorm strategies she could try with some of these students. She helped her brainstorm procedures she could set up. She reassured her multiple times, like, you are capable of doing this. You're only just in your first week. Like, it's not going to always be like this. So she really reassured her. She offered to come into the classroom to co-teach and model some strategies. She just had so many different wonderful mentoring supports that she offered. And by the end of that session, all those problems weren't solved, but that new teacher no longer felt stuck. Like, there was at least a plan to move forward. And I tell you, that happened, I think, 5 years ago, about that mentoring conversation. And that teacher, that new teacher, that first week, she is still teaching in that same classroom today.
Yay, thank you. I was going to ask.
Yep.
So that shift, so this is what I'm hearing, and Susan, you can chime in too. So there were a couple of things that you're saying that need to be part of preparation programs, or our listeners who are mentors in their school district, mentoring new teachers. It doesn't have to be from teacher ed. We're all in this together, helping the novices, whether it's formal, informal. When we see somebody with the body language that needs help, we need to help. We can't say, I'm not a mentor. I'm not being paid to be a mentor. I don't have that hat, or I don't want to step on somebody's toes, or all of those things that come up that I hear from classroom teachers, because we get nervous because we don't want to cause problems. But body language matters, and that this was a prepared mentor who knew how to respond to that. And the other thing that I heard in your story is hope. It's like, we just need to have somebody say, I need to hear it even today. And I'm a retired teacher. Like, I just need to hear it sometimes. Like, hope, like, yeah, you can do these podcasts, Carol. Yeah, don't worry about it. Like, we just need to hear this. So those social and emotional skills cannot be buried anymore. That's that well-being piece that is getting sloughed away by education. Oh, self-care. And okay, maybe it's not a mani-pedi. It's not that. It's an attention to what's actually physically happening to people that are teaching. And look at the quick result. I mean, that's amazing. We can do it. Okay, Susan, what do you want to say to what I'm saying? What Sara just shared? What do you think?
Yeah. Well, I think, when new teachers go into buildings in their first jobs, they want to be seen as professionals, right? And it's
Yes.
so hard for them to admit their weaknesses when things don't go right. And so I think one of the things that we have found, I mean, Sara just said this was the first week of school. And I think we're finding that because they had this existing relationship, because the same person had mentored her during student teaching, they were able to pick that right up. She knew the mentee, knew of her personality, how to approach that. And so I think building that relationship is such an important part of the mentoring, and whether it's existing or whether it's something you do, but helping them to be a safe space for them to share their vulnerabilities is so
Right.
important.
And that really leads to the topic that I want to kind of dive into a little, is the role of teacher preparation in being that, and being that person that knows the student teacher, knows that they were great, because what you said is so true. Novice teachers go into a new place. I can remember my sons are both teachers. My husband's a teacher. We're just like teachers everywhere. And I was the director of student teaching at the university. He was like, do not talk to anybody. I don't want anybody to know that you're my mother. I want to get my own job. I want to, if he hears this podcast, he'll have something to say, but it's all true. So he gets his own job. I'm the mentor guru. My thing is, like, I write books on it. I write dissertation, blah, blah, blah. He gets the job, and he has the worst unprepared mentor, and he doesn't want to tell anybody that he needs help. It's classic. It's just what you're saying. And I'm laughing a little because it worked out, and he's still teaching, and he's happily teaching. But what you're saying, we need to really hear, and maybe that's how we capture it through the body language, or how teacher preparation can work with the teachers at the school so that the novice teacher feels comfortable and safe enough to say he didn't know what he was doing. But he didn't want to tell anybody that he didn't know he was, because I'm like, why don't you go to your mentor? He's like, I don't want him to know I don't know what I'm doing.
Right.
And I was like, oh my God. So these are real stories. So let's hold that thought. And we're going, so let me just tell a snapshot of how I ended up in higher education. So I was a fifth grade teacher as well. I taught in fifth grade. I hosted a student teacher, and my whole experience was, so what am I supposed to do? And the answer at that point in teacher preparation was pretty hands off. It was just do whatever you think is great. And I, of course, being who I am, decide I'm going to write a book. So I write a handbook for the cooperating teachers. That's what we call them. A handbook for techniques and strategies for coaching student teachers. And immediately the department chair from the college came over to meet me in person and say, "Oh, what are you doing?" The good news is we ended up collaborating because they just never had reached out at that point in time. Like what you're doing is current, but everybody isn't doing it. And that's why I wanted you to be on the podcast. So everybody isn't reaching out from higher education to follow their grads. So one thing led to another. I ended up getting the doctorate. I loved the student teaching. I get the job like you, Sara, director of student teaching, mostly because I complained a lot that higher ed wasn't doing what we needed to see in the classroom. It's like, we are not getting, these people are not prepared. And now we have all these cooperating teachers who have to do all the mentoring because you guys didn't do it. So it was pretty much a little bit of a blame game, which I had to eat my words when I became the director of student teaching and discovered how hard it was to actually do it from higher ed. Let's just stop there and let you react to what I've just said. Sara, what what do you think?
Well, I think that is such an important point that you're making, is that our programs need to listen to the cooperating teachers that are in the classrooms with the student teachers, as far as what do they need to be successful mentors, rather than us, sitting like, oh, we're the experts, we're going to tell you what to do. Like we need to work together. And I think we have seen how important that was when we built our student teaching workshop. We brought in some of our partners in the classroom, our cooperating teachers that have supervised many of our student teachers, and said, what do our new cooperating teachers need to know? Like, what have your experience been? Can you share some of the ways that you've been co-teaching, that you have mentoring conversations, the strategies you use, and that voice, and then bringing in that voice to talk to the new cooperating teachers was so much more authentic than just Sue and I coming from our offices to tell them how to host student teaching.
Exactly. Or getting the handbook of rules. I mean,
Right.
that's what I got. And I wanted to know how to have a conversation. Now, what happened after that, I'm now the director. I did similar to what you did. I brought people in. The one thing that I did that I loved, that I wish more colleges would do, colleges of ed, is that the dean, we would give vouchers to the cooperating teachers, like as a gift, like a free course. And nobody did them. The principals all took the vouchers because they were in master's programs, and the teachers were too busy to take a course. So yeah, you're laughing, Susan, right? It's crazy, right? And so I came up with an idea. I said, how about this? I'm going to create a course for the cooperating teachers to prepare them, and they're going to use their voucher. So they're going to get 3 college credits. And the dean supported it. She was like, good. Well, the principals weren't too happy because they lost their free voucher, but that was part of the preparation. And then if a teacher didn't want to take the course, well, we didn't require it. But what happened is, over time, all the teachers who took the course using the original book that I had written were prepared. And slowly we attritioned out the teachers who just did it for a voucher. And then we got to say you had to take the course. I mean, it took a few years, but that was okay. And it made such a difference in the preparation. Now, I say that for any college listeners on the call, like it can happen, or whatever that motivation is, to give credit for that. And they took the course at the same time they were student teaching. So that's how my book became Mentoring in Action. Because people are like, well, do I have to take it before I can take one? No, you're going to take it as you go. You're going to learn as you go. So reaction, Susan, what do you think of that idea?
That's exciting. It's very exciting. Yeah, I mean, we actually offer a stipend to our cooperating teachers and sketchies, so they can get continuing ed credit. So we're trying to give some of those incentives, but we do have a robust training and workshop experience for them where they can learn about our vision of mentoring. They hear, you talked earlier about a common language, right? So there's common vocabulary, having everybody in the same room. So I think that that's really a powerful piece of that. So, you know, Carol, you mentioned something a minute ago about how mentoring has changed where, and I think Sarah, you had this experience where your mentor just left the room and just said, here, your own. I think one of the powerful things about our model has been this co-teaching that we're trying to promote, that the cooperating teacher does not need to leave the room, but can actually stay in the room and mentor. And the
I
novice
love that. I love
learn.
that.
Yeah, they can learn from them by being in the room rather than just exiting. So, but in order to do that, we have to prepare them. Like, what does a good mentor conversation look and sound like? So Sarah and I actually do this role play where we play a student teacher and, you know, and a mentee and a mentor, and about a conversation that was an experience from Michigan State. And then we rewrote it the way we wish it had gone. And then we debrief it and pick it apart and think about the moves that mentors make. And you know, everybody laughs and giggles at our acting, but it's a fun way to really unpack some of the elements of mentor conversations.
I love that. Yes. And I'm happy to share anything that I have. I have a robust website, Mentoring in Action. You can take anything from there, use the role plays, the mini courses, because we have to share with each other. We're working in this field and we all are mentoring the next generation of teachers from wherever we sit. So I want to just dive into that place of mentoring our graduates beyond when they graduate. So I stayed as director of student teaching, and then a Carnegie grant came along where it was to focus on how successful are your graduates? Are they actually staying in teaching? And what we discovered in this NCATE review, which it was NCATE at the time, was we didn't really have a systematic way of following it. It was all anecdotal. And a lot of the people at the university where I was working left the area. They came to school and then flew back home to their other places. So we had to either make a decision to do online or try to figure out how do we follow our grads, and every university is different. So one of the things that we did that I wanted you to react to is the teachers who did stay local in the Boston area, we did bring back with a mentor who would facilitate a group. So I shifted to the mentoring in action book, that month by month book that Susan, you were saying you use. And every month they would come back and we'd unpack the topic in the book. The biggest challenge was preparing the mentors to be group leaders. So now we had been training them to be co-teachers like you. We're on the same path, or how to have a good mentoring conversation, how to listen, all of that. And now they'd have 10 teachers in a group at the university. How could they use that time to give hope? Like Sara was saying, they're coming in draggled. It's 4 o'clock in the afternoon. They've taught all day. How do we shift? And that was our biggest challenge, is creating an agenda of hope so they'd want to go back and teach, not a gripe session. So do either of you have any experience with beyond the graduation, group mentoring or hybrid, or are you exploring that? What's going on with that, with your program?
So when Sue and I went to the AACTE conference to present about our model, we ran into a number of other professors from other schools and that were also presenting. And I have found that a lot of schools are doing different models for post-secondary mentoring or university-based mentoring. some of them, like your example, are that the new teachers come to the campus, which I love because it really builds that sense of community. I think being a new teacher can feel pretty isolating sometimes. And so they're able to have that community of each other, that cohort of each other, but also, like you said, be led through a mentoring conversation that's helpful instead of just a venting, which they could, do with their mom or their friend. It's
Right.
really can be guided by someone that can, help them process their experience. And then our model is more going to them. So we send our college supervisors who are already go through like extensive monthly mentor training. We use that pool and send them out to work individually. Now, some of those mentors then also do some activities where they get like the 5 people that they're mentoring together, like they take them out for dinner or they, but that's pretty an informal piece. And then there's other colleges who are sort of doing a hybrid model where they have sometimes like once a month where the students come to school and then also provide some individual time where they're going to the campus. So I think it really depends on the resources that the college has, as well as, how many graduates they
Right.
have in the
Right. That makes
area.
sense. But I think it's
Um,
an idea that we need to put more in the forefront for teacher preparation programs, because I think we
Absolutely.
do a pretty good job to get them there. But then even your aha moment, it was with a teacher the first week of when they get there and who's partnering now.
Right.
So, Susan, any reaction to the after you graduate model and ideas, or how we can um, do a better job of that?
Yeah, I think I just would like to react to one of the things you said. It's got me thinking about how we get teachers together, and it's the natural inclination is to complain, to gripe, and some of that is therapeutic. But we've found that case studies are really helpful when people can bring a case to the group and have everyone share. And that I think they really can start to hear, number one, I'm not alone. And number two, here are some things that somebody else tried that I can take back. And so I think that has been kind of a powerful tool that we can use in these situations.
I love that. I have moved more into the group mentoring model, even in the schools. The book I wrote, Teaching with Light, we create circles of light. And we actually started it just for the novice teachers and the mentors, but all the teachers wanted to come. So in some of the districts, they just all come. And the goal is to, yeah, what's the problem? What's the challenge? What we all have had them. It's what do we do when we have them that the group there is something about the group that goes beyond the dyad that I'm very interested in right now. So I'm just planting that seed with our listening audience and encouraging more of this. And it can be done effectively on Zoom more than I thought. I
Mhm.
do have districts that are doing it and creating these circles of light where the teachers just get to dump a little bit of what's not going, and but then they leave with hope because they get to share and react, and everything you're saying is just so important. I so appreciate both of you today. So what's some advice for someone who is mentoring or helping a new teacher um, that they can do easily, not what we've been talking big ideas, Um, what comes to your mind, Sarah?
I I think from both watching a lot of mentoring and from my own experiences working, as an instructional coach and working with teachers um, in their student teaching placements, really thinking about as a mentor, helping them identify or focusing on, I call it the big ticket items. What in all of this that they're struggling with or in everything you're seeing as a mentor, like focusing in your energy on what's going to be most effective for student learning. What
Okay,
um,
yes.
what are,
Yes.
rather than trying to solve every single thing that you see.
Yes.
It's kind of like the same
Yes.
approach I use when I teach writing. I'm not going to comment on every single issue in the paper that I notice, but what's going to get me the biggest bang for my buck? I have this limited amount of time, and to have this conversation, like, what can I focus on that's going to have the biggest impact for their instruction on, on student learning in the future, the
I
ways that it
love that.
student learning.
Yeah.
So
Thank you. Susan, do you have one?
Sure. Mine is find your people.
Okay.
It's, there, there's such a collaborative nature to all of this. I think if you're in K-12, find people who are like-minded. I have found my K-12 partners who kind of share my vision of teaching and know about our program. And, those are the people, and everywhere I think I've taught, I have found my people, and they're people who not only dream with me, but they help me implement small things. That's how I started a school, just by dreaming with someone, but also knowing yourself well enough to know what you need to complement yourself. I mean, I tend to be a very big picture person. Sarah's very detail oriented. So it's, I found
That's a good match.
no,
That's a
great
great
match.
team.
Yep.
That's a great team. That's a
Yep.
great team. So before we wind down, you're each working on great projects. Just a snippet on what, Susan, what is on your plate right now? Many things, but what's one
Yes.
project that you would like to infuse into this conversation?
Sure. Project Impact is a group throughout Michigan that is working to create mentoring standards for the Michigan Department of Education. It was a grant that was put out. It's being overseen by Western Michigan University, but it brings together P-12 people, university personnel, as well as State Department folks. And it's been a really collaborative effort it's based in theory, and we've been knocking out standards. And then the next thing is to create curriculum and really start to get this out so that we have materials and things to support K-12 districts as they work with their mentees and new
I
teachers.
love this. Is any other
Yeah.
state doing mentoring stand? I know the New Teacher Center Santa Cruz started. That's how I was trained originally. Had some standards and developmental continuums, but I haven't heard of any other states. So keep us posted on that, so we
Okay.
can add it to our notes in the podcast for people who are interested in that. And what about you, Sarah? You have many things on your plate, but what's a project that is of interest to you right now?
Well, and I want to also just put an exclamation mark on the work that Sue is doing, because I think that, we're so worried about the teaching shortage, especially in Michigan, and our state has done such a great job in looking at new recruitment options and putting a lot of money and resources into all of these different recruitment programs. But retention, to me, is really where we're not focusing enough. And somebody said at a conference once, retention is the new recruitment. Like, retention is this existing pool of teachers that are already trained. And I would love to see more funding and resources going into mentoring for retention purposes. And, whether that's training mentors in our districts or, supporting university-based mentoring programs. But I'm glad that they're taking this initial step to do some mentoring standards, but I really would love to see some more financial support and resources
Right,
by
right.
the states put into retention.
Yes, I'm totally on board. Triple exclamation. Actually, that's the project I'm working on. So the project I'm working on is mentoring for teacher success. It's on the homepage of my website in case anybody wants to take a look at my big picture. I'm a big picture person too, Susan. And then I get to the details. But the big picture is uh, i- inspire confidence, build competence, and retain teachers. And I think that's what we have to do. It's all the pieces that we talked about in this conversation. It's that physical confidence And it's the skills you talked about, Susan, the competence. There are strategies that we have to keep building. And then I do believe we'll retain teachers. And it's through the mentoring and everything we talked about. So final thought, big takeaways from this conversation. Any surprises? What stood out to you? Any final thoughts for our listeners that we want to emphasize? Besides retention, which is a big emphasis. Well, I think what a takeaway is for me is the collaboration, bridging the gap between PK-12 schools and higher education. I've spent half of my career in a classroom, more than 20 years, and the other half in higher education, teacher preparation, a lot of different roles. And I really feel we're still in silos, and that this mentoring conversation in the book that Ben put out, Mentoring for Wellbeing, and how I found the two of you by reading your chapter, kind of brought back that passion for me that we are both. We are the teacher preparation, and we have a lot of people, their pathway is not through teacher preparation to become teachers. So in higher education, I worked in alternative pathway for 7 years, helping teachers that were in the classroom, training mentors to work with them, and they had never gone to college to be a teacher. And we have those pathways. With retention, it's going to become more prevalent with retention issues. So I guess my takeaway and my big ask or inspiration is, how can we use our teacher preparation programs in innovative alternative ways to mentor the people who didn't go through our college program? I mean, that's a piece. So,
Sure.
so that's a takeaway in another podcast. Susan, do you have anything you want to underscore?
Yeah, I think one of the amazing things that we are seeing is that our graduates now are out in the field and are mentoring our new teachers. And the power in that has been amazing to see. There's a connectivity, and I feel like we're building a network within West Michigan, certainly. And other places can do this. There's when you see somebody who went through the program and maybe who even struggled, who's now has a student teacher or a beginning teacher in their building, and they are mentoring them, it's this full circle. And I think the more that we can build those networks, the more powerful it will be. And we've even seen some of this happen. We were talking about the power of being, or the availability of doing this online. We've seen people connect who aren't living in the same places, and they're still supporting one another. So I think, and I could see even within schools, we're seeing little pods of people, and they're starting to pull in other people. So you're talking about how we reach people in our program, but I think they're also reaching folks within the building because they see what's happening and they see the possibilities and they want to be a part of it.
Bigger network. Thank you. Sarah, last word.
Yeah, I think that there's just a lot of reciprocity in developing partnerships between university programs and K-12 schools. I think that there's so many benefits for both sides put in that effort to collaborate.
And so many of us are from both sides, right?
Yeah.
So thank you for that. I'm going to close out with some affirmations from the Mentoring in Action and the First Years Matter books. And the affirmations that I chose for this session are, if you're a mentor, your affirmation is, I am an advocate for novice teachers. And if you're a mentee listening to this, and we're all mentees in different ways, I ask for what I need so I can be successful. So I want to thank all of you for taking your time to have this conversation that it's really near and dear to my heart. This is my life's work. So I was happy to share it. You're my people now, Susan. I found my people. So thank you for being part of episode 6. And I hope our listeners would tune into episode 7 for more real, authentic conversations with teachers. Thank you.
Thanks,
Thank
Carol,
you.
for having
Thanks,
us.
Carol.
Thanks, everyone, for joining today's teacher-to-teacher conversation. We hope this time together energized you, inspired you, and reminded you why you chose to become a teacher. You can purchase any of Carol's books and any books mentioned in the podcast online at www.corwin.com. Please leave a review and share this podcast with your colleagues. Thank you for listening to the Corwin Teacher to Teacher podcast, a place to share teacher wisdom and engage in authentic conversations with experienced educators.
Come explore Corwin's free New Teacher Toolkit and resources. We've curated these resources based on extensive research from teachers, coaches, and principals alike. Whether you are brand new or a veteran teacher, find ready-to-go teaching tools at corwin.com today.